Hello and welcome to the first ever podcast of the Rings podcast. I'm Jessica Lynn Verdi. I am joined by expert Tolkien person, Alexander Mitchell. How are you, Alexander?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm really well. I'm really excited to get schooled about some Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yes.
So you're excited about The Power of the Rings, which is an Amazon series coming out.
The Rings of Power.
Sure. What is it called again?
Rings of Power.
Okay, great. So that's a really good example of what you can expect on this podcast is I know about Lord of the Rings. I know about Tolkien. I know very little, though. And you know, like, more than I realize people can know about this stuff.
Yes. I know a lot, but there is a lot I don't know because there is so much. The lore of Tolkien and his world of Middle-earth is vast. I don't think there's any one person who knows it all. But I know a lot, I would say. I know a lot.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So one of the reasons I thought doing this podcast was a good idea is I own the Silmarillion. A lot of people have heard about the Silmarillion. A lot of people will never read the Silmarillion because they're told that it's way too much information.
It's intimidating.
Exactly.
It's intimidating to get into.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where, like, I'm sure I'd like it, but I even tried reading it once and just I put it down really quickly. And I know that the Rings of Power, did I do it right?
Yes.
Is not based off of the Silmarillion, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Technically, yes. So
technically, they don't have rights to the estate of Tolkien.
They have rights to the Lord of the Rings and the appendices in Lord of the Rings, in which some of the events, the important key events, I would say, of the Second Age of Middle-earth are described. And so that has some overlap with a portion of the Silmarillion. But they technically don't have the rights to all of the stuff in the Silmarillion.
Well, because there's also so much. I think that was something you talked about, like, just to give away the rights to that entire series of events is basically giving away the cow and the milk for free. One of the things that attracted me to doing this podcast is, of course, there's going to be a bunch of people doing a podcast about this show, perhaps, because there's a lot of podcasts about Lord of the Rings in general, including the two hobbits do their own podcast.
Yeah, the Friendship Onion. I listened to that. I haven't been keeping up with it lately, but it's a joy.
But you can't compete, is my point, right? It's just so what you have to do is differentiate yourself. So in the launch leading up to the new series, because you are such a expert, we're going to cover some things that we think might be in the show on Amazon Prime.
Yes, and some things that maybe won't be, but are part of the lore.
Good for context.
I think what I would like to do is just give people here's what we can draw from the history we have, and some of this is just coming from like Unfinished Tales or Silmarillion or various other books that probably won't be in the show, but it's good. It's fun to know that stuff going in, to have some context of, you know, these characters that you have seen in the Hobbit films, the Lord of the Rings films, or just reading from the books. But maybe there's things you don't know, and we're going to go into that.
Yeah, I'm excited. So then once we get this part of our appendices done, then we'll be doing...
This is our appendices of the podcast.
That's right.
Coming before the main course, I suppose.
Is that right? Is that the right way to say
metaphors. It? Sure, yeah.
Great. So, and then once we get through this series, we'll be in knee deep, episode per episode, talking about what happened, talking about where there was precedent for certain things in Tolkien's work, or if they just went off the deep end into Greyhaven and created their own
Oh,
darn
well,
thing.
we know that's going to happen, but I'm curious to see where it
Or
happens.
how it happens or
Yeah.
why. And we've watched the trailers. Even you watching the most recent trailer, you're like, ah, the meteor, which I have no idea what that means. But
I don't either, but there is speculation. And should we talk about that first, maybe, like, just before we dive into the deep stuff, just what we've seen so far about the show and what we can maybe speculate about.
yeah, and I thought just for a little bit of context, how long have you been a Tolkien fan?
Sure.
Why do you know so much?
Well, I first my first brush with Tolkien was actually the Silmarillion.
No way.
Yeah, my I didn't get far in. It was I was in second grade, so what, I would have been 9.
That sounds
Um,
insane.
my dad had all the books, and I saw it, and it was for some. Uh, it was I was in kind of a separate literature class or English class in second grade for, like, the advanced students in second
Yes, the
grade or
ones who
whatever.
could read more than 20 pages a book.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. And so it was very, like, laissez-faire. Like, they let us do whatever. We could pick the books we wanted to read for these assignments we had to do. And so I said, let me read the Silmarillion. Why not?
Oh my gosh.
And I
But had your
remember,
dad like orally told you the story of the Lord of the Rings? That
no,
might have. So you
no, I
just thought,
just,
"Oh, I'll read this?"
yeah.
Based off of nothing, not knowing anything about anything. Had you
I
seen
knew,
the Hobbit, the Rankin Bass Hobbit?
yes, at this point I had seen the
Okay,
cartoon. So I
okay.
guess that was technically my first
I
intro.
just
But
didn't know what your drop in was. It was
no,
that was my
I
point.
was aware of it, but I hadn't, like, read Lord of the Rings. That was, like, the first memory I have of reading any Tolkien stuff was
Fair, fair.
Silmarillion. Before I read The Hobbit or anything, but I had seen the cartoon. I was aware this was at the time when it was, like, the buzz about the movies was happening too.
Oh,
Um,
you were a baby.
yeah, yeah. Um, and so I read that, and I remember, like, one of the things we had to do was, like, illustrating something from it, and I illustrated a battle scene during the war against Morgoth in the First Age, for anyone who knows what that is, uh, of Feanor and his sons, like, fighting Balrogs and stuff. And then I went on to read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and then see the films, and that sort of sparked a lifelong love of Middle Earth and Tolkien in me, to this day. And so, yeah, that's my kind of background with that stuff. But I always loved, I think because I started with the Silmarillion, I always loved just, like, the nitty gritty of, like, all of the different characters and history of the world. It just felt so rich and, like, alive, for lack of a better term. Sometimes you read fantasy and it's like, okay, this is a fun story. But when you read Tolkien, it feels like a real place that you're just sort of scratching the surface of, the history of it. When you read Lord of the Rings, there's all these references to names and characters and people in songs or just in passing, and you're like, who is this? What is this? And then at least for me, that inspired me to go and then figure out what is that. Follow the threads.
Oh,
So
so you literally like I did this once. I tried to do this once with Dune where I'm like, "Ooh, I want to look up that word or whatever." And so I would like write down in a notebook the things I wanted to learn more about, but then just gave up
yeah.
swiftly.
Well, so one thing that I do now, if I don't know something, if I'm, like, rereading, I have it right here. A Guide to Tolkien is one of my favorite books. You can just look up something. You can look up a name, a place. You're in the text, and you have these books next to you. I have an atlas that I have if there's any locations or something. So I have all this supplemental material that sort of enhances the experience for me.
So I say this with love. You are totally dorky for Tolkien. Total
Oh
total
yeah.
nerd.
Oh yeah.
Would you say that Tolkien is your top fandom?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Certainly.
Very
Certainly.
cool. Yeah, and my quick drop in is that I do own the first edition of the Silmarillion. I've never read it. I did read The Hobbit when I was in seventh grade, and I did read the following books thereafter. And I think I reread The Hobbit a few years ago. I liked the movies.
Well,
What?
hopefully after this experience, this will inspire you to go and read parts, at least, of the Silmarillion.
No, probably not. But I do look forward to learning more anecdotally from you and asking you all the dumb questions because I
Sure.
bet you I'm going to have questions that people will have, but they're afraid to ask or don't care to even Google, but
Well,
they'll
I
know.
hope I have answers. Many of these I probably, as you're hyping me up as an expert. I know a lot, but there's a lot I don't know, and I'm fully willing to admit I don't know what that is. Because
True
again,
wisdom
there's
is knowing what you
so
don't know.
exactly there's so much. It's so vast, and I haven't read it all. There's so many like again, it's not just Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. There's Unfinished Tales and all of these other books that
So you're
have
saying I should have gotten a different co-host for this job.
probably yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the trailer or whatever or what we know going in. What let's see what do you got for me?
So the main thing is this is taking place during the second age of Middle Earth. So Lord
What
of the
is
Rings.
Middle Earth?
What is Middle Earth? That's the land in which these stories take place.
Great. Is
There,
it our world but in like but like the
yes.
past?
Yes. So Tolkien conceived of this as kind of a prehistory or a history rather of our modern day world.
Got it.
So we
Got
are,
it.
according to him, like living in the fourth age, basically, or beyond that, of Middle Earth. And one of the reasons that he did that was because he was fascinated with myth and legend of other cultures. And he felt that the English didn't have their own real myth that was kind of destroyed when they were invaded. And they have kind of like Arthurian stuff, but that's, not going back that far as
Right.
far as other cultures. And so he wanted to sort of create that for England,
Huh.
right? An origin myth for his home country. And I think he succeeded, I would say.
I don't think I think he made an excellent story, but I don't know that it's mythological in that we're telling the story of it like Osiris was real or these people believed it to be. Like people worshipped a lot of the mythologies or believed them to be truths.
Yeah.
We know this obviously we know most of the myths are based on fiction, but like at one point cultures believed in them. We don't have that kind of reverence in the Lord of the Rings, but I do think he's he successfully created a world that sparks the imagination and almost makes us feel like elves did and dragons did roam the world,
Yeah.
you know.
And it's certainly on the same scale as those.
It's beyond almost. And to think it all came from one, it's almost better knowing it all came from one source.
Yeah.
It's just one's brain, just like it's just so cool.
He worked on it nearly his whole life and didn't even finish.
Right.
Right. The Silmarillion is a product of Christopher Tolkien, his son, basically taking all of these disparate texts that had been left behind after his father's passing, and he really had to edit and curate. What do I include? What is the canonical, quote unquote, which is a whole can of worms with Tolkien's world. He has many different versions of characters, and there's contradictory source material for various things, including stuff about a character we will be talking about soon, like Celebrimbor, who will be featured in the show. There's depending on what you want to believe was the true version, So Christopher had a monumental task in like publishing the Silmarillion, even because his father never finished it. So it's insane what he was able to do in his lifetime, and it's great. We should be grateful that he had a great steward in his son, a steward of his work, because he really did a lot during his long life to give us as much as possible as fans.
I finally know what steward means because we just watched all the movies too.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think steward is like one of those words that like but I didn't realize exactly what it meant. And again, when I watched the movies, I was too young to be like, I know what steward means. I care. But someone who is holding on to something or carrying on something in lieu of someone else.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and to briefly go back, what we know about the show, it takes place during the Second Age. Obviously, we're going to see the creation of the Rings of Power. Yes. It's the title of the show. Right. We're going to see that. But aside, and we know the characters. So the characters we know, like the big ones that we will be talking about before we dive into our first one here. We know Galadriel is going to be in the show. We've seen her. Morfred Clark, I believe, is playing her. And then we have Elrond and Gil-galad, and those are like, and Celebrimbor. Those are like the elf characters that we know from the canon, if you want to call it that. And then we have Isildur and Elendil, who are Númenóreans, and that's another part of the world that we will get to. And then we have Durin the Fourth, who is a dwarf. So we're going to see that side of things in Moria. And then the last one we're going to talk about, which is going to be interesting when we get there, is Sauron, or AKA Anatar, as he's known to the people of Middle Earth in the Second Age. We'll get there. That's a whole other thing. I did not
realize that this was going to be a thing.
And we know that he's not going to be in the first season. I have thoughts, as many other people do, about that. But we'll get there. So those are like the main
Sauron isn't going to be, but is the name of the person what's that other name you just said?
Anatar.
Could Anatar be in the first season?
We'll get there. I don't want to get into it. This is the Galadriel episode. That's a teaser. All right. We'll get into all of that. I have thoughts, but let's just say I think we've already seen him in some of these trailers, even though he's not. They haven't announced that he's going to be in the first season. So those are the characters that we're going to talk about in these first like lead up episodes before the release of the show. We're going to go into kind of their history and the context of them in the world as we know it from the text. But then there's this whole host of other characters that we're going to see, including what they're calling the Harfoots, which is basically another name for hobbits. It's a sub
Harfoots.
Yeah, a subspecies. Hardfoots. Well, drop the D, but yeah.
Footses are hard.
They are, yeah. They don't need shoes.
No, they don't.
They're great.
Shoes.
So all the Harfoot characters, the hobbits didn't play any part in the text that we know in the Second Age, but they're going to include them in the show, which I think makes sense, right? Everyone, when you think of Lord of the Rings, you think of hobbits.
You want
hobbits
a hobbit,
and wizards, right?
You want a hobbit and you want a wizard. You definitely do, and maybe a dragon, but you can live without a dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're definitely right. We want a hobbit for sure.
Yeah. So those are all original characters. We're getting some original characters in the men. I say men meaning humans. Tolkien called all humans men, which we've advanced beyond that terminology.
But we will probably refer to them as that in this podcast,
because that's what Tolkien called them. So
correct.
We have mannish characters who are like what they call kind of middlemen. They're not Númenóreans, right?
Okay.
They're just living in Middle Earth, not on Númenor. We have some original characters there, and then we have this. I think Arondir is the name, a wood elf character. So all sorts of original characters, which is exciting. I think that's cool. But we're not going to be talking about them because obviously we don't really know anything about them.
We don't really know anything. But what we are doing is, at least if no one else listens, I will be having a really great base of understanding to go into this new series.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
That's the goal.
So can we move on to talk about the hot lady of the night?
My favorite character.
This is your favorite character.
Probably
the most probably the most well-known character thanks to the movies, and like the character we can tie our anchor to or whatever
Yeah,
in
I
this
mean,
story.
so we're talking about Galadriel,
Ah.
everyone's favorite, I think. So I want to.
Yeah,
Wow,
if they're your favorite, doesn't mean it's everyone's favorite. I might be an Eowyn fan.
fair. Well, fair. Okay. Well, my favorite, Galadriel.
There you go.
Um, Let me ask you, because so we did just rewatch um the trilogy,
Yes.
and she appears in all the films, which I think is cool. I mean, only really in person in the first one. And we get the great voiceover from her.
Kate
um
Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett, phenomenal actor. What's your, just like based on your knowledge as someone who's like, you've read the books,
Right.
you've seen the movies, maybe not as much as a diehard, lifelong, devoted, reads them every year, Tolkien fan. What's your like impression of Galadriel
That's a great
as we
question.
see her? Because spoilers, she's old as hell. She's lived a long life. She's going to be in the second 8 show, but we're seeing our first introduction to her ever is in Fellowship of the Ring. What's your impression of her then?
Yeah, I think she feels like an omnipotent, omniscient, sort of mischievous character. Not even mischievous. She's not like going around, playing pranks on everybody, but she has like a knowing calm to her that she won't meddle, but she knows just enough what to do in order to help things along. You're supposed to get the sense that she's a good person because she's bathed in white light and stuff like that. And then there's an argument to be made that good versus evil, dark versus light is not necessarily healthy to contextualize things in our society as such
Well, but
things.
that's what Tolkien's all about.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that
I think
the
you're right.
more I live on this planet, the more I realize how that terminology has its roots for good and evil. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, to use the thing you're criticizing to
Yes.
contextualize. Well, that's one of the things I love about Galadriel's character is I think she's one of the more complex characters from what we know and what Tolkien wrote about her. She isn't like just good or evil. Like she has a little bit of both at play, and it has to do with her lineage. It has to do with what she's been through. It has to do with her history. And
So she's like a lawful neutral.
this is interesting. We should do this for maybe all the characters. Like, what's their
Probably.
alignment?
Yeah.
I would definitely not say she's lawful. I think she would be.
You don't think she's lawful?
No. I think
chaotic neutral?
I think. Ooh,
No.
she's not chaotic. I think she'd be neutral.
Neutral?
Maybe she might be true neutral or neutral good. I think, even
Yeah.
though she has like, because she kind of is like in it for herself in a lot of ways. I think neutral good or neutral, like true neutral, maybe.
Perhaps. I think that's interesting. You can let us know if you agree. We'll figure out if we have a Twitter or not coming up soon, but
it'll be there. We'll
you can
put it
also
in the show
join our
notes.
Discord, yeah. And let us know.
We'll just check the show notes. It'll all be there.
It'll
We'll do it in post.
all be there, baby.
So I think that's a good assessment of her. But let's dive in. This is going to be a lot, but I think it's important to contextualize her. And this will help contextualize all the other elf characters that we're going to be talking about. And I think Galadriel is a good place to start with because she directly has ties to these events. So we're going to go all the way back. This is what I want to do. We're going to go I know you're shaking your head already.
No, I'm excited. It's just so much. This
is going to be a lot, but we're laying the groundwork for everything else. Okay.
Great.
So let's talk about the history of just the elves.
Okay.
Where do the elves come from? How did they get here? Who are they? Okay. So the world was made by the Valar, which are basically basically gods. Yeah.
The Valar. Okay.
Long story short, there's one evil guy, this guy Morgoth, or Melkor as he's originally known. He doesn't become Morgoth until
Why are there so many names for one person?
Tolkien, I told you, this is mythology, this is history. Tolkien names are very important. They all mean something.
Okay.
There's no random names. Anyway, Melkor is kind of like the Lucifer figure. He's evil, but he's like the most powerful among the Valar. The world is made. They fight. The world is like reshaped. Anyway, they're told, the Valar, by like their daddy, Iluvatar, right? The one who made them, the true god. You must prepare the world for the elves, the coming of the elves. There's going to be the
what
elves.
What is the daddy's name again? All I can hear is daddy in my ears.
Eru Iluvatar, the one.
Iluvatar.
Eru
Iluvatar.
There you
okay.
go.
Yeah. ERU.
And
okay.
I'm probably going to mispronounce some of these names too. Pronunciation is hard, but so he makes the Valar, they make the world. He tells them, look, my children are coming, the children of Iluvatar. That's why he's daddy, right? And the first among the children are the elves, right? And so
okay.
the Valar's job is to make the world.
And Eru creates the Valar?
Yeah, he creates everything.
Why does he create things?
Why did God create the universe, if you believe in that kind of thing, right? This is all, that's theological questions. Yeah, he's bored. He wants something to do. This is like his hobby.
Got it. Okay.
Before he clocks into work, he's like, oh, let me like check up on how art is doing.
Great.
So the Valar are like, oh, the elves are going to be awakened. We don't know when, we don't know where, but they're coming. We got to get the world ready. And then Melkor messes stuff up. They, fight him. He kind of goes off and hides and, makes his evil base and everything. And it's no, and they're off waiting, looking for the elves. And so Arome, one of the Valar, he's like the hunter kind of god, I think. One day he's like walking around Middle Earth and he finds the elves at Cuivienen, right? This lake kind of valley thing. And he names them the Eldar, the people of the stars. And
what were they doing? Were they just like bathing naked in the lake?
Pretty much, yeah. They're just hanging out. They like
the elves just wake up. We're in the dirt, and they're just like, "Hey, I'm alive now and hot."
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, no clothes, just like bathing in the waters of the lake and looking at the stars, like, ooh, pretty.
For real? Am I right? That's kind
basically, yeah. That's basically what happens. Yeah, you're 100% spot on.
Ooh, you hear that? The world.
So he finds them, and then they're kind of like, he goes to talk to the Valar of like, what should we do? He's not going to make a decision on his own. But Melkor starts like messing with them. He starts capturing some of the elves.
Oh no.
They're scared of him.
Yeah.
Just they're being whisked away in the night, some of them. And we won't get into too much of it, but that's where the orcs, one of the theories of where the orcs come from is it's like these elves that were captured by Melkor and corrupted. Anyway, long story short, the Valar go, we're going to bring him back to our land, Aman, which is like this other continent. Arome goes back. They're like, oh no, we're scared. Like this other guy is evil and scary. Like, we don't want to go. Like, we're not sure. And so he brings back, or Arome brings back 3 of the elves with him: Finwë, Elwë, and Ingwë. You don't need to remember these names. But they are important.
I feel like they're all baseball field names.
Like who's on first?
No, Fenway, Fenway
Park.
Yeah, sorry,
Fenway Park.
Yes.
John Elway's.
Exactly. There's some sport thing happening here. Okay, great.
Or Carrie Elway's, not John Elway's. What am I thinking? Carrie Elway's, right?
Carrie Ewell's is an actor, but John Elway is a football dude.
Does he say Ewell's? I thought it was Elway's.
I have no idea. I always heard Ewell's, but it very well could not be that.
Well, you heard it here first. He's one of the 3 elves that got brought back to Aman. And they basically were like, here, we're going to bring back ambassadors, right? You can see what it's like before you get here and make your decision then, right? These 3 end up becoming like the leaders of their respective clans of elves. And this is where it's important for the history of Galadriel. So there's like 3 different types of elves, right? So they go back to Aman. They see the 2 trees, which are going to become important, Telperion and Laurelin. They light the world, right? One is basically the sun and the moon, right? The golden light and the silver light. They see this. They're like, oh, this place is great. like the Valar are hanging out here. This is like idyllic, much better than like us getting whisked away in the night by this evil god. So Orome brings them back to their people, and then the great journey begins of the elves. Now, some of the elves choose to stay behind, right? They're like, we don't want to go. But most of them are like, we're going to go with you. And the ones that don't go are called the Avari. Not really important, but the fun lore tidbit. And so then there's 3 clans of elves. Like I said, we have Fenway, Elway, Carrie, and Ingwe, and they lead their respective.
Yeah.
Steve Irwin.
Yeah. Oh, that sure.
Yeah. So they lead the 3 different clans. Now the 3 clans are
a basketball player, Ewing? Yeah, Carl Ewing. Wasn't he a Bulls?
Jess, we're on a podcast talking about deep cut lore and Lord of the Rings. Do you think I know basketball players?
No, but I feel like we had to just carry it out.
Carrie always it out. So there's 3 clans of the elves: the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. They're each led by one of these elves. The Noldor are where the important ones for the Second Age. So remember that, the Noldor, okay? And the Teleri are the ones that break off from the journey, right? So all the elves are going back to Aman, but along the way, some of them are like, we're going to chill here, actually. We haven't seen all of Middle-earth. So some of them stay behind in the woods that would eventually become Mirkwood, or Greenwood, as it was once called. And those basically become like the wood elves, right? And so those
and
are
the
from
Eldar is like the catch-all term for all of the elves?
Yes, like the people of the stars, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And so the Teleri split off. Some of them split off. Not all the Teleri, but some of them split off and stay behind in the woods. They become
Are these the ones that make the Ents talk?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, and that's also Yavanna, but yes. Okay, they're like right. They fall in love with the trees in the woods, and they're like, we're gonna actually chill here. Okay, we don't want to continue along the way. And then they continue and they go past the Misty Mountains. So Cuivennen was far in the east. And the Misty Mountains, you remember from The Hobbit, they cross. Rivendell's like right on the Misty Mountains. That's where the Fellowship has to go through Moria, right?
Ah, yes.
So they eventually cross over the Misty Mountains and get to the land of Beleriand, which, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, Beleriand does not exist in Lord of the Rings for various reasons, but don't worry about it. It's not important.
You can't say that.
It'd be a lot. Much. There's so much we could go for 3 hours. But some of them choose to stay behind in Beleriand, which is basically this whole part of Middle-earth, the continent that used to exist past the Blue Mountains, which is this other mountain range. So it's this whole other part that sunk at the end of the first stage for various reasons. So some of the Teleri actually stay behind there too, right? They were like, oh, I guess Mirkwood and Greenwood wasn't good enough for us, but this place, we're going to chill here. And they linger there. And also their leader chooses to linger there. Elway,
instead of going back to the Valnar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Valar. Yeah.
Valar.
Yeah. He is so enchanted with this land. He chooses to stay behind. And so those elves become the Sindar, the gray elves. And Sindarin is like the main elven language spoken in Lord of the Rings. There's actually 2 different elven languages.
Oh.
So then the rest of the elves, they go back to Valinor. So some of the Teleri that didn't stay behind, and then the Noldor and the Vanyar, they all go back to Valinor. Okay. Any questions at this point?
I am so lost already. So
cool. The main thing to remember is the Noldor.
The Noldor.
Okay? The Noldor. They are led by their king Finwë. Okay.
Now, and where do they go?
They all
Mirkwood.
go to no. They all go to Valinor.
Say it again.
The Noldor.
The Noldor, led by Fenway Park.
Yes, exactly.
Go to Valar.
Yes.
Got it.
They go to the Valar in Valinor. Yes.
In Valinor.
Yes, which is on this continent across the sea to the west.
Got it. And also you told me this, the world is flat. in this
At this
stage.
point. At this
Yes.
point.
So they just go and they sail to Valinor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
And this is one thing where, like, in my mind, this is like Tolkien is so geography and locations are so important to Tolkien. So when I'm picturing all of this, I have the image of the map in my mind and it makes sense. Like, that's one of the important things about this, is like knowing the geography and everything helps to visualize this. They were so important to Tolkien. So anyway, they cross the sea, go there. Finwë is the leader of the Noldor, right? Fenway Park.
Finwë.
And he is the grandfather of Galadriel.
Oh.
Yeah, so she is very closely related to like the king, the original High King of the Noldor. She has noble blood in her veins.
Did he or did he not have when did he conceive his first child, or her mother or father? Was that in Middle Earth or was it in Valinor?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because can they go back and forth from Valinor to Middle Earth?
Yes, at this point they could.
I see.
But they don't until later. And we'll get to why later, because that's
But is she born in Valinor?
Yes.
I see. Okay,
yeah,
that was my question.
I think all of Finwë's sons are as well, but I'm not sure.
Okay, just curious. Yeah.
So Finwë has 2 wives. Not at the same time, don't worry. Miriel is his first wife, and his first son, one of the most important characters, Feanor, was born to Miriel. And Miriel died in childbirth because Feanor was like so
amazing,
awesome that she, like, to
Herculean.
bear him. What's that? Yeah,
Herculean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Herculean. Yes, he's like so good and great and awesome and talented that she's like, oh, it's so much strength to like bear him. So she dies, and then I can't remember his second wife's name, but that's all the other kids of Finwë, including Galadriel's father, Fingolfin, or not Fingolfin, Finarfin. All these names are Feanor, Fingolfin, Finarfin. There's all sorts of names. I think Finarfin is Finarfin is
Finarfin.
Sorry,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
They're funny names. There's an elf called Elmo.
No.
Yeah, look it up, listeners. Just Google Elmo Tolkien.
Elmo Tolkien.
Elmo. Yeah,
that is actually very cute.
So Feanor is very important. He's a half brother to all his brothers. He is Galadriel's uncle. And he sees Galadriel's hair and asks, it's so beautiful. It's said to, it's just weird because he's but like,
so he's the origination of the weird uncle.
He's the OG weird uncle.
Oh,
the weirdest uncle. He's like looking at Galadriel's hair.
Oh no.
Well, before we get into that, so when Galadriel's born, we'll talk about this first. She originally, so Finarfin is her dad, and he's a Noldor elf, right?
Noldor elf. Finwë in Valinor.
In Valinor, yes.
With the Valar.
Yes.
Got it. No, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's a lot. I know. Eowyn is her mother.
Eowyn.
Yeah, almost Arwen.
Yeah,
Eowyn.
That's interesting. It's interesting.
Arwen,
what up?
Arwen. There's a lot of diphthongs in Tolkien names.
Right.
She is a Teleri elf. So remember that, some of them that split off, and the Teleri like loved the sea, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of them lingered, is because they were like right on the coast, and they're like, oh, we want to chill here, and so they like built ships and everything, which will be important later. So she has like some loyalty or like some connection to the Teleri elves and some to the Noldor because she comes from mixed heritage, right?
Okay.
But she's considered nobility. So her uncle Feanor, this amazing craftsman, the most
creepy
talented
uncle.
elf, creepy uncle, he sees her hair, and in her hair is said to be captured the beauty of the 2 trees where all light comes from, the gold and the silver. And he asks 3 separate times for one strand of her hair. And
it's creepy.
Him. It's very creepy.
It's creepy.
But it's so creepy, but it's very biblical, where like you look at the lineages and the family trees, and you're like, everybody was related. Like, there's
If
some
my
weird stuff
uncle
going
asked
on.
me for strands of my hair, I'd be calling 911.
And I don't blame you.
I'm just saying. That is something I'm going to have to warn my future children about.
Well, I think
Do not listen to Uncle Joe when Uncle Joe wants. And I love my brother Joe, but if Joe wants hair, there's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, like, there wasn't much going on, I think, at this point of Valinor. The hair was like, they're just kind of chilling.
I understand.
Like, making stuff. The elves are all about beauty and arts, and they're like, oh, I'm inspired by this hair.
But why is Galadriel the most of what an elf can be at this point? Why is... I'm sure there's plenty of children. I'm sure there's plenty of offspring. So what makes her so special?
Well, at this point, she's not. But
why is her hair incredible or whatever?
That's just because she's beautiful.
Okay,
I don't know. So her elves have like different stages of like names. They're kind of like given a name, and then they like get a name when they mature and stuff. So her original name was Artanis, which means noble woman.
Okay.
Right.
Probably noble woman. Sorry, I just have to. I'm just trying to ground this for me so I can remember everything. Carrie.
Yeah. Fenway Park, Carrie Elways, noble woman, right?
Artax.
You gotta have those touchstones.
Yep.
Yeah, Artax, noble woman. Probably because she was fair and beautiful, right? But then eventually she becomes known as Nerwin, which means not a very, complimentary name, man maiden. But this lends itself to, and I've seen the internet comments, she could fight. She was buff.
I see. Okay.
She could hold her own. So much that she literally has a name meaning man maiden, which may be outdated in the terms we think of what manliness,
a man maiden could be.
Or a woman can be. But, the elves are a different culture. Tolkien lived in a different time.
So when you're saying you've seen the comments, what are you referring to?
There are a lot of people out there who, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you've seen the trailer. And if you haven't, go watch the trailer, the Super Bowl spot as well, for the Rings of Power.
Okay.
They show Galadriel in armor with a weapon fighting, which some people have come out and said, this is a abomination. How could you do this to the character of Galadriel? This is woke propaganda because we have to make a strong female character who can fight for herself and all this stuff. But it's backed up by Tolkien's text. Like, this is who she was.
The people who are against that kind of stuff are wrong?
Yeah. And you know what? I will say, even if it wasn't something that existed in Tolkien's own words and his conception of the character in his writings, it would still be fine.
Yeah. No one cares about your opinions.
But the fact that you can point to stuff in Unfinished Tales where it talks about her being an awesome warrior is just sweet when you can like point to Tolkien's own words and say, you're wrong, idiot commenter on the internet.
It's like the mansplainers who are like, you obviously don't read this. You didn't read this book. And the author's like, I wrote it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm an expert in this field.
Yeah.
But I think they have the idea of Peter Jackson's image of Galadriel and her description in Lord of the Rings, to be fair, in mind, but they don't know the history of the character, which is fine. Not everybody does, but maybe check yourself before you go off on a rant. About that kind of stuff.
My guess is those people don't really care if they're right.
No,
or wrong.
They're just trying to push their own agenda, which is fine.
Not fine, but
yeah.
we'll just let them
I
stay
don't
over
care.
There.
Let me put it that way.
Yeah, let's do it.
So that's her name. She's an awesome warrior in her own right. And remember, she has this mixed heritage, Calarian Noldor. That's going to become important. So Feanor, going back to him, creepy uncle, as we said, he makes these 3 jewels called the Silmarils, right? That's where the Silmarillion, the name comes from, the tale of the Silmarils. And in these jewels, they're his greatest work, the greatest of all the work of the Noldor. The Noldor are known for like their craftsmen or crafting abilities. And he captures within these jewels the light of the 2 trees of Valinor.
How?
Magic.
Okay. Carry on.
That's going to be the explanation for a lot of things. How?
Great.
Magic.
I will ask. That's what I will ask. Okay. Moving
So,
right along.
Long story short, Melkor, remember him? The evil Valar
Yes,
guy?
the bad guy.
Lucifer, right? Well, it turns out when the Valar defeated him, they just chained him up and like brought him back as prisoner, and we're like, we're gonna keep you prisoner for like three long ages, because like you're our brother. We're gonna let you atone.
It's kind of like what they did to Loki, kind of.
Exactly. They're like, your family, like, we're not gonna just kill you. So he's just hanging out in Valinor, and he starts to like redeem himself, but he's jealous of Feanor and the Silmarils, and he wants those for himself.
Oh, no.
And so he starts to manipulate and sow seeds of doubt and paranoia in Feanor's mind. Remember how Feanor is a half-brother to his other kin, right? His mom is a different mom. So he starts going, Melkor cozies up with him. He's like, hey, your brother Fingolfin, your second oldest, the second oldest brother, he's your half-brother. He wants to take the Silmarils from you. He wants to take the kingship from you, right? Because you're the eldest. You're right, but like, so he starts sowing those seeds. And eventually Feanor secretly makes weapons that there weren't weapons in Valinor before. They didn't have need for them. It's a peaceful place.
No.
He starts secretly forging weapons, threatens the life of his second oldest brother, Fingolfin, in front of everybody in public, in front of the king. And Fingolfin just kind of shrugs it off and is like, look, I'm not going to engage. But it sort of, it's a bad look. Feanor gets exiled from Valinor. He has to go to Formenos, and his dad joins him because I guess he's playing favorites.
Yeah.
And the Silmarils go with him. Melkor ends up, the Valar figure out what's going on. They're like, oh, Melkor's like sowing these seeds of discord. And he flees before they can deal with him. He runs off. He eventually comes back with the spider Ungoliant. She's not really a spider, but she takes the form of a spider. So Shelob.
She can,
and that's her preferred form. We just saw in Return of the King, because we were rewatching the trilogy, Shelob, right? That's a spawn of Ungoliant. So she's the OG spider. So Melkor comes back with her, and they destroy the two trees.
Okay.
And kill Finwë and steal the Silmarils. Okay?
How sad.
A lot happens. It's very sad. So what ends up happening is Feanor, he is basically like, we got to get these things back. And he's still under the influence of the lies of Melkor. One of the lies is like, the Valar want to keep you here, and like they don't want you to be free. And so he also has this desire to like go to Middle Earth, because you asked before, like, can they just go wherever they want, right?
Right.
They can, but the Valar kind of want to keep them in Valinor, in Aman, to protect them.
Okay.
Right, but they're not going to like hold them hostage, right? So Feanor is like, we got to go after Melkor, and he names him Morgoth, which I think means like betrayer or something. So that's where he gets the name Morgoth. Anyway, names are important in Tolkien.
Yes.
So Feanor leads the Noldor people all the way up north to Alkoland, which is like kind of like the port place. It's where all the ships are. And remember, who likes ships? The Teleri. They're the shipbuilders, right? So these are the people of Galadriel's mother, right? But Galadriel is with Feanor and the host of the Noldor during this, and she's kind of like, she always kind of wanted to see Middle Earth. Remember, she's never seen Middle Earth,
right?
And she's curious, she wants to go there, and so she's kind of like with Feanor in this, like, yeah, sure, let's like go to, and Feanor has his sons swear an oath to like, anyone who holds a Silmaril, like, we will kill them, which leads to many shenanigans and wars later on. The War of the Silmarils is a whole thing. It leads to just all the bad things. Never swear an oath like that.
Okay.
You don't know what you're getting into.
Yikes.
So they go up to Alkoland, and they say to Teleri, like, we need to go to Middle Earth. We're going after this Morgoth guy. And they got all these weapons. They're ready. And the Teleri are kind of like, nah, you can't have our ships. Like, no, not cool. So they attack in the first kinslaying, the first time elves have killed other elves.
Oh, no.
Because they have weapons. I think the Teleri have weapons at this point. I think the cat's out of the bag. But anyway, the important thing here for Galadriel is that she defends her mother's people in this conflict. So she fights with the Teleri, like, to defend them. Even though she, like, has Noldor blood, but she's kind of, like, looking at Fëanor like, what are you doing, dude? Like, this is not cool. So she's standing up for herself, and it in the text it says, like, she fought valiantly and well and, like, led some of her people. So again, to the haters, like, it's in the canon.
They're probably not even listening to the podcast anyway.
Well, maybe they should be.
I know, but I'm just saying they're probably not.
So Fëanor, they end up getting the boats, and Fëanor takes his people, but, like, his brothers, remember? So he takes him and his son.
His stepbrothers.
Half-brothers.
Half-brothers, yeah,
Not
yeah.
So Fingolfin and Finarfin, right? So Finarfin being Galadriel's father. Yeah, it's so a great name.
So dumb.
I just think of a dog.
Yeah, for sure.
He's like, you can find your own way to Middle-earth. And so they have to cross the Helcarax, which we see in the trailer.
Okay.
It's basically the Antarctica of Middle-earth.
What is it called again?
The Helcarax.
Helcarax. Okay.
Yeah. And so we're going to probably see that in the show.
Okay.
I would imagine. And then what happens? They chill for a time. So Galadriel, they eventually, through losing a lot of their people in this terrible migration, right, going through icy wastes, Galadriel eventually makes it over there with her people.
Kind of like the Donner Party.
What's the Donner Party?
The Donner Party is not like the Donner Party at all, where people made the journey into the West, and the Donner Party was the Donner family that got, I think it was in the Rockies. They were stranded, and then they ate themselves.
Oh, no.
They lost people.
Yeah, you know what? It's never explicitly stated. I don't know if the elves had to resort to cannibalism.
Is it cannibalism if they're not humans?
Well, it's their own people.
Oh, so is that what cannibalism means just in Gen?
Yeah, I don't think it specifically means eating humans. I think it
means
someone eating their own kind.
Of their own kind. Got it.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see that in the show. We should start a bingo card and put the
Donner Party on there.
Yeah, put that on there. The Donner Party square.
We're gonna put it right in the middle because I'm sure it's in there.
Yeah, our free square is Galadriel.
I can't believe you don't know the Donner Party. That is
Look,
American.
All the space
history.
in my brain is being taken up with everything I'm explaining right now.
Clearly,
the Donner Party was pushed out years ago.
Clearly.
Yeah, but now I know. Hey, we're both learning things on this show, which is great.
It's so good.
So
they
Galadriel,
lose people in this tough migration.
Yes, they maybe resort to Donner Party tactics. Who knows? It's open for interpretation. But they get to Middle-earth. They get to Beleriand, this part that doesn't exist on your Lord of the Rings maps. And Galadriel's like, you know what? I just went through a lot. She just, like, kind of chills for a while in this kingdom of Doriath, a wooded realm ruled by remember our old buddy Elwë?
Yes.
He now
not
goes
Finwë
by
or Yules.
No, not Finwë or Yules. He goes by a different name now. Eru Thingol. Or Elu Thingol? Thingol is what they call him. Anyway, he just changed his name because he's, like, different now. And she chills there with her brother, Finrod, son of Finarfin. I love all these names. And this is where she meets Celeborn.
Aha.
We see him in
and Celeborn is someone we will be talking about in an upcoming episode more.
No, that's Celebrimbor.
Oh my god.
There's a lot of Kellas.
I think I regret this podcast.
There's a lot of Kellas.
Kella.
But she meets Celeborn here. He's, like, one of Thingol's people. I believe his grandfather is Elmo.
Okay.
I think, because Elmo is Elwë's brother, And then I think Elmo is Celeborn's. I could be wrong. Fact check me on this, listeners, please. Write in.
Write in.
So, yes, please. So they meet and they get married.
Who?
And then Celeborn and Galadriel. So they get married.
Is Celeborn the person that she's hanging out with in the first movie?
Yes, that's her husband.
Okay, so she's with that person.
Yeah. They event not for, well, when we see them in the events of Fellowship of the Ring, she is, but
great.
But they're married now in the first age.
Good for them.
They don't really
like each other.
Who knows? I don't know the interpersonal dynamics of their marriage. I think based on some decisions that happen, we can maybe assume that there's some turmoil and like maybe it's a marriage of convenience or something. There's a lot to read into with it.
Sure.
But they both end up going over the Blue Mountains, so the mountains on the eastern part of Beleriand, and they go into the land of Eriador, which is like where the Shire and all that stuff is in the Lord of the Rings. So they move out of Beleriand before it all goes to hell and it sinks. Now during the Second Age, after the fall of Beleriand and all that stuff, Celeborn has rule over the land of Harlingen, which we're gonna see Linden in the show. It's like where the Grey Havens are. So remember at the end of Return of the King,
right? That's
where they are.
Got it.
Like
okay.
all the way in the western part of the map. Celeborn rules over Harlingen. They like take in some refugees from the War of Wrath during the First Age and the sinking of Beleriand. They eventually go further into Eriador, rule over some like Sindarin elves, and have a daughter, Celebrian. And she eventually will marry Elrond and then have Arwen. And so...
Yeah. And is Galadriel yet?
Yeah.
When did they change her name? Did you tell us that already?
I don't know. That's actually one thing I don't know is like, and there was recently a book released called The Nature of Middle-earth where they get into like elf culture and like physiology and, all of that stuff. And they talk, I think Tolkien talks about like when they have these different names and stuff, but it in some cultures you have like a kid name, and then eventually when you reach the age of maturity or whatever, you get renamed or get to pick your name, or
yeah,
I don't know exactly how it works.
When she got a new name, okay.
It was long ago at this point, in age, a literal age ago. So they have their daughter Celebrian, and then a few hundred years later, they relocate to Eregion, which is the kingdom ruled over by Celebrimbor, the guy who makes the Rings of Power, and the guy we'll talk about in a future episode.
Oh, now I understand.
So they live in his realm. And I have to note here, during the Second Age spans thousands of years. So from the time their daughter is born to the time they move to Eregion is like 400 years. And the events of this show are going to be very much squished in terms of the timeline.
Right.
Because they want to have like these human characters who
tie everything together.
Yeah,
kinda.
Who can last the time the show spans without like dying and having like, tens upon tens of generations of people. So a lot of the things that happen, even if there's hundreds of years between them in actuality and Tolkien's conception of the timeline, it's all going to be squashed down for the show.
How long is the Third Age?
A few
and that's
thousand
the
years.
age. Okay, that's the age where Lord of the Rings takes place, etc.
Yeah, because I think, it's like the year 3000 something is when, I don't know the exact dates, but the year 3000 something is when Lord of the Rings kind of starts and takes place. So thousands of years. And then we're already 1,000 years into the Second Age. In 1200 of the Second Age, she connects with King Amdir, who is the ruler of Lorien at the time. So where we see her in Fellowship of the Ring is ruled by this other guy, and she like makes contact with him. Now these are the Teleri. Remember before, some of the Teleri elves stayed behind east of the Misty Mountains where Lorien
Okay.
is. So these are like the Wood Elves. And so they
the
haven't
Mirkwood,
really
Greenwood elves.
exactly.
Got it.
And these aren't Mirkwood because it's Lorien, so it's a little further south. But they kind of have been isolationists, but they make contact with them. And eventually, a couple hundred years later, Galadriel decides to bring Celebrian, her daughter. They cross through Moria, which I have to point out at this time, the dwarves and the elves are friendly.
Because also the elves helped them build Moria. Because
exactly.
Because like the door melon or whatever. Yeah. So it's a whole thing.
There was some conflict with the elves and the dwarves in the first age, but Celebrimbor kind of mends this relationship a little bit and becomes friends with Durin, and they help build Moria, and a lot of the things in Moria together, like the door of Durin that we see in Fellowship of the Ring with the Ithilien, the moon writing essentially, that was like helped built by Celebrimbor. So they're friendly with the dwarves to a certain extent, and so Galadriel takes her daughter through Moria, underneath the Misty Mountains, and goes to Lorien. Guess who stays behind though?
Celeborn.
So this is where it's like
the husband.
Yeah. It allegedly, according to the text, it's because he was like suspicious of the dwarves, but that might have been an excuse. You know what I mean?
To do what, in your opinion?
I'm just saying. You asked if like what their marriage was like.
I see.
He's like, what? You know what? I gotta like stay behind these dwarves.
I mean, independence it can be a nice hallmark of a relationship. To be fair,
sure.
We don't want to put past judgment, but it could be a harbinger of doom. Another thing I want to talk about in an upcoming episode is, where did the dwarves come in and when?
We will. That's a whole thing. We'll talk about that when we talk about Durin, because it's very important.
I see. Yes. Okay. Great. I can't wait. Yeah. So Galadriel takes Celebrian through Moria to Lorien.
Yeah. Lorien is the one of the two trees.
One of the trees.
Yeah.
Lorien.
Yeah.
Where we see her when we meet her in the Fellowship of the Ring. But she's not ruling it yet.
That's where we meet her, but she lives there for now. She'll go do other stuff.
Got it.
In the meantime. But that's kind of her first, like, she's like setting up in Lorien and kind of like falling in love with it. And, like, oh yeah, I could call this home. But this is like a common theme we see among the elves, is like you have these like high elves, right? Ruling over the wood elves and like the green elves, the Lyquendi, the Nandor. Those are like different kinds of wood elves. But like, so for example, it's a similar situation with the elves of Mirkwood with Thranduil, Lee Pace. Thranduil is not a wood elf, but he is the king of the wood elves of Mirkwood. This is like a common thing Tolkien does, where some nobility, essentially, like some high elf who like either saw the light of the two trees or is descendant from the elves who were in Valinor, like comes to the wood elves and is like, I'm your king now.
Jeez.
So yeah, it's class is very important in Tolkien's works, as evidenced by like Frodo and Sam's relationship and many others. So Galadriel goes there, lives in Lorien with her daughter. And in 1693 of the Second Age, she is given one of the three rings of power. Nenya, the ring of adamant, by Celebrimbor. So at this point, they've kind of realized Anatar's plot. And so they decide, like, we're gonna separate these rings, give them different people. The other two get sent to Gil-galad, who we'll talk about. He's the king of the Noldor at this point. And then the other one gets sent to Círdan, the shipwright, who's a fan of ships. And he eventually gives his ring to Gandalf later on.
Is he a Tellarrian?
I believe he's a Teleri, yes.
Teleri, okay.
Yeah. Could be wrong on that, but I mean, he built ships. I think he's a
That's
player.
just what I was trying to say. They like the ocean.
Yeah. See, you're getting it.
I sort of
You're
am.
making the connections. Yeah. So she gets the ring of power at this point. She's chilling in Lorien, and she starts to use this ring to like kind of, or no, she doesn't do that till the third age. Sorry. So then we have, I'm going to gloss over this because there's so much. The War of the Elves and Sauron, so much happens, and we're going to see that in the show. But she doesn't really in the books have a big part in this war. She's just kind of chilling in Lorien. But then she eventually, after that war, goes back to Rivendell. And finally her and Celeborn reunite.
After like hundreds of years?
Yep. Ooh. Probably about over 400 years.
I guess if you're immortal, it does, nothing's really sacred.
Yeah, I mean, for them, it's nothing.
It doesn't matter. Yeah,
she's lived through an age and then some. So 400 years.
It just doesn't matter. Like, yeah, she's like bored,
right? Well, she's just like yeah. I mean, she's at least she's got her daughter.
Yeah.
Huh. But I'm pretty sure that when she goes to Rivendell, like that's where Celebrian meets Elrond, and they eventually, yeah. So they chill in Rivendell for a while, and then they go down to Belfalas, which is in the southern part of Gondor.
Belfast.
Sure, okay. Belfast, yeah. It's like the southern, there's like this little thing that sticks out of Gondor. It's where Dol Amroth is, Prince Imrahil. There's this whole line of humans with elf blood, somewhat separate from the Númenóreans. But they kind of just hang out there for a while. And then I don't want to get into too much of the Third Age stuff because we're focused on the events before.
Right.
The events before the show. But that's kind of like the context of like, and during, I guess. But that's the context for Galadriel. She eventually goes back to Lorien and uses her ring of power, Nenya, to like make it this idyllic place that we see by the time of Fellowship of the Ring.
And you said that the idyllic place was like Valinor on Earth or heaven on Earth for her.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that happens with the Noldor when they leave is the Valar basically enacted this thing called the Ban of the Valar, where the Noldor are not allowed to return to Aman. And so she misses home. She misses home. She can't return. And that eventually gets lifted, but she's able to go back. But, for a while there, she's like, look, I'm never going to see my home again. And so she uses the power she has to like do her best to create a little tiny bit of Valinor in Middle Earth. And that's why you have this amazing, magical, beautiful place of Lorien.
Yeah, you don't think it can get better than Rivendell, and then you go there. Right. So we got a really great, almost too much information on Galadriel, but we all love her. So what do you think we're going to see happen with her character in this series?
I think, well, we're definitely going to see the crossing of the Hellcracks. We saw that in the trailer. I think we're going to see the thing that we don't get a lot of in the text, which is her like leading her people in a sense, right? We get this thing of like, well, she, goes here and like, they rule over the Sindar for a while and then they go somewhere else and they rule over, we're going to see her on the ground leading her people, which is exciting. And then I think based on some of the stuff we've seen in the trailers, we're going to see her going to Númenor, which again, this is a deviation from what we know. Doesn't mean it couldn't have happened. There's room for it to happen. I mean, you have hundreds of years.
But what do they think she's going to be doing in Númenor? What would be the point of sending her there?
So in the teaser that we just got, the 1 minute teaser where we see this meteor coming down and everyone's looking up at it.
Right.
I think that that's going to be this thing that unites everybody into going, what the heck is going on? And so I think some of that, that might be an impetus for her to go.
I see.
To be like, let's go talk to the Numenorians. Like,
I see.
Do they know anything about this? Right. Potentially. I don't know. I honestly don't know. That's my theory right now. It could be a lot of things though. But I think we're going to see her interacting with the Numenorians, and yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know any specifics. They I think are going to deviate heavily from a lot of it, because a lot of the stuff comes from the Silmarillion. So I don't think we're going to see.
Yeah, that's what I'm really curious about too. Is how much liberty can they, and are they going to take?
Yeah,
in order to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
In a sentence summary about Galadriel, what do you think is the most important aspect of her?
I think the most important aspect of her is twofold. This is a single sentence. Her desire for power and sort of ambition, I think, is one way to put that. Her ambition and wanting to, for the reason her going in the first place, seeing Middle Earth and leading her people, ambition. And when we see her in the Second Age, this sort of longing for home and feeling of conflicted, like, well, I'm here now, but I want to go home, right? So it's this kind of, she wanted to go to Middle Earth to satiate her own curiosity and to fulfill her ambition of seeing all the world, but then at the same time, she's to go back home, trapped. And she's.
We always want what we can't have, Alexander.
Can't always get what you want.
Okay, but sometimes. So who are we going to talk about next week?
I think next week we're going to continue with the elves. I think we'll talk about Elrond.
All right. And again, I think we decided that we're going to start with a few of the characters that people probably already know, kind of give us a foothold into the series. And again, this is all just speculation based on what you think the series may include. Not this, the characters aren't speculation. You know that certain characters are in there, but you're telling us things that may be important to know going into the series.
This is all for context and getting an idea of, like, okay, what happens to Galadriel before the events of the show that we're going to see. So
it's great. Well, I'm excited. I think you need to do a pop quiz with me next week to see how much I remembered.
Who are the three tribes of elves?
The Finwë. No, wait. The Telemar and the Nandors, and they all are Eldar.
Yes, you got it. Nailed it. The Vanyar one, that's one you forgot. And the other two you got close enough.
Okay. The Tamaris and the Nunyas. None of your business.
Tamales and the Nunyas. Yep.
Oh my goodness gracious. Some people are going to be like, why is this person even on a podcast? Because we're dating. That's why.
Well, and because I think a lot of the people out there who are going to be watching this show are in the position that you're in, and it's relatable because they don't know all these names and they don't know half this stuff. But look, you can always start to learn about this, and even if you don't remember all the names or pronounce them correctly, if you're passionate about Tolkien's world and you want to know more about it, that's totally fine. And that's why, like, all these people out there on the internet trying to gatekeep, trying to say what is and isn't Tolkien,
and who can and who can't like it, and who should know and shouldn't keep. Not welcome in this community.
Tolkien is for everybody, regardless of if you heard about it yesterday and you're interested, or if you've been a lifelong fan. Come on in. The
only thing we don't tolerate is intolerance. Again, this episode is just a little bit longer because we kind of wanted to give you the background of what this whole series is going to be. Keep it on this dial, folks. If I do my job properly, you'll have a new episode every Tuesday. And I think that that's in keeping with the timing of the show too, but it may adjust as the series gets released. But Alexander, thank you for all the work you put in today.
I'm happy to share all of this stuff.
I know you are. And I'm really happy to listen to you talk just in general because you have a very lovely voice. Yeah, check us out. You can find Alexander on Twitter at twitter.com/Solkatu, SOLKA22U. And I am at Jessica Verdi on Twitter. And check out the liner notes for more ways you can connect with us. Until next time. What's our sign off, Alex?
Put me on the spot here. I don't know. One ring to rule them all?
No, why can't we be melons? Why can't we be melons?
Why can't we?
I think I don't know. What do you think? What do you think is a fun Tolkien phrase? Wow, you really nailed this.
Bad in the moment.
Bad in the moment, only good on paper.
Yep.
Okay, good farewell until next timeth.
May our roads meet again.
May our roads meet again. There it is. Bye, Alex.
Bye.